Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. If you like listening to us chat about CrossFit news and everything that's going on in the sport, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. On today's show, we have sports analyst Brian Friend and head coach of Underdogs Athletics, Justin Cotler. We're discussing the incorrect shuttle run scores submitted for quarterfinals workout number 3 and how the leaderboard still has several errors surrounding this workout. Now, we did reach out to CrossFit to give them an opportunity to appear on this episode, and although they declined, they did send us a statement. So now we're going to look at the statements that they sent us from CrossFit. First, it's important to note that we are continuing to review this situation, but we are confident that any potentially erroneous scores will not affect athletes who are qualified for semifinals. According to our review, athletes that are on the cusp of a qualifying position are not mathematically likely to reduce their total points enough to enter a qualifying position. The two scenarios are: one, scores above both the last place qualifier and the runner-up are erroneous and removed. In this case, both athletes reduce their total points by the same amount, netting the same competition result. 2, scores between the last place qualifier and the next viable runner-up are erroneous and removed. Note, a viable runner-up must place worse in workout 3 than the last place qualifier. In this case, viable runners-up would need enough erroneous submissions removed between them and the last place qualifier to make up a points difference in order to result in a change in qualifiers. The average across regions shows that it would require 70% of submissions between the qualifying athlete and the next viable runner-up to be erroneous to result in a change of position. While this is possible, it is unlikely. And finally, CrossFit says that we have also updated the scoring adjustments article to include the workout 3 adjustments. These adjustments were not available when much of the online concern was being voiced, which likely contributed to the concern. Hopefully, this visibility will give more confidence to athletes following the leaderboard.
It's a mouthful.
A lot in that. I don't remember the last time I read a script that long, but man, that's what we got so far from CrossFit. Brian, I want to start with you. You've done the research, know that you've done the work. Is CrossFit's statement inaccurate to say that the erroneous scores will not affect athletes who qualified for semifinals?
I mean, like this whole situation is really just kind of sad and frustrating for me because, no one wants to see this. Everyone wants a competition, whatever the competition is, to be administered and executed and reviewed cleanly, and the communication to be clear and concise and one time, and not have to go back and forth and have these kinds of conversations. So, the whole thing up to this point is really unfortunate, and this is, in my opinion, is only making it worse, because to answer your question succinctly, there have been people around the world who've already done the work to prove that these statements that CrossFit is now releasing are inaccurate. And even the specific cases that they're highlighting as the potential examples, those two scenarios are exactly true. And I've talked about this on the Savan podcast. We wrote about it on a Morning Chalk Up article. Andrew Hiller's released a couple of videos highlighting this. And in particular, the scenario number 2 is the one that's, of great intrigue to me and curiosity, that they would say that that's unlikely to happen when we know for sure that it actually could happen. And we can just look at the North American men that are close to the cut line for a really clean example of this. It's already been discussed on those other platforms, but we can re-highlight it here. There's a guy in 125th place, which is outside the cut line, and his name's Will Bennett. His score on that workout is exactly the type of score that CrossFit mentions in their scenario number 2, where he's close to cut line and he had a very bad score on that workout. We can see it there. It's 798th. If you scroll up to see the guys that are just ahead of him, you can see that they did significantly better on that workout. 163rd for Gunnar Reagan, 609th for Skylar Osetnik. So he would be another example in the category of Will Bennett. Very bad score relative to guys around him. And we see a variety of scores: 300, 500, 600, 200. And if you scroll up a little bit further to guys that are still really close to the cut line, we see scores that are a lot in the 100s, 158, 68, 86, and 82 of guys who've just gotten in. That means that there's somewhere between 300 and up to 600 or 700 potential, score. No, there are up to 600, 700 scores that come in between Will Bennett and 4 of the last 5 guys who made it into semifinals in North America. And I don't know where they're getting a 70% number from, but when I look at the cut line of 1,263 points, which is the tie for the last 2 guys in, and I see Will Bennett having 1,321 points, and I just do some quick math, it's 58 points, that I don't think that 58 points is 70% of 700 or 600 scores that are between there. So I'm not sure who's doing the math that's associated with the claims that they're making in this article, but this is only one case that we can look at very clearly here on the leaderboard that shows that scenario 2 actually is very relevant for some of the athletes around the cut line.
Justin, I want to turn to you now because you're a coach of several athletes, games athletes, and also athletes that are on the cusp of potentially qualifying for a semifinal. Do you have a specific example of somebody who is affected by workout 3, whether they will go to a semifinal or not?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have an athlete. His name is Mitch McClune, and Mitch is actually currently 119th. He's tied for 119th at 1,263 points. So he's last man in right now. And if you look at his score on workout 3, it's 609th, right, at 1614. So there's a significant possibility that somebody like Mitch could be affected. Now he's in, which is phenomenal. But I mean, if he was sitting at 121 or 122, as his coach, it would be very, very challenging for me to continue to create a narrative that made him feel very good about him sitting in that position when, I mean, we see what's going on here, which, is obviously a little bit of a shit show. And I think what's frustrating as a coach is we tell our athletes, control what you can control, right? So ultimately, we were diligent about reading all of the rules and the standards as far as the shuttle runs were concerned, making sure that people understood that it's down and back equals 1, et cetera. But you can't guarantee that that's going to be the case around the world, right? But what you expect is that whoever is judging, and in this case, obviously CrossFit, you expect that they're going to get it right. So that, because there were times on the leaderboard when I looked it up, and there was a time when Ricky, right, in Australia was 12th, and I looked at the people in front of him, and he texted me, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, some of these times are crazy." And of course I looked it up, and I was like, that's because they're not true. I mean, that's, I'm looking at the scores, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to tell that, hey, look, this person came in, 1,200th, 2,000th, blah, blah, blah on the other workouts. But now on this workout, they just pulled a 1209 and they're in second place. No, like, I'm sorry. I don't know that person. I mean, there are some examples, right? Michaela Norman and various other people who we know are phenomenal at those specific movements. But in general, I think at this point, I feel like I'm relatively experienced in enough and know the sport well enough to be able to kind of decipher some of those and most of those. So I told Ricky, don't worry. And then I think now he's back, he's in second, right? But there are still cases as you look all over the leaderboard where that's not the case. And, frankly, it's disturbing when you try to tell your athletes to control what you can control and that, everything's going to work itself out. And then it doesn't work itself out. And at that point, what are you supposed to tell them? That's my question. Like, what are we supposed to tell them? Is it this, we're supposed to give them this explanation from CrossFit and they're supposed to be cool with it, where it says it's unlikely to, but we already know that's not the case. So we're in some choppy waters here, I think. And unfortunately, I don't know how they're going to get themselves out of it, but it kind of brings up in the future, I think there's going to be a lot more mistrust about scoring and about the judging. And, I think there's going to have to be some changes made because if they're going to do a workout like this and they don't have the bandwidth to be able to judge the videos, then they shouldn't do a workout like this. I mean, that's bottom line. So that's the way we feel about it.
Justin, with so many athletes that you are coaching and overseeing, what is the response? What are they coming to you saying? And then how do you respond, especially now that we're seeing how CrossFit is responding with things that are not correct?
I think initially we just figured it would get worked out. Like I don't think there was any doubt. We expected, okay, they're going to review these. There's no question. Like they're, essentially like people are turning in a video, you request the video, and they're going to watch it. Especially you're going to see some of those. How can you not red flag some of those scores, right? Like you're going to look at it. You're going to see the inconsistencies on the other scores, and you're immediately going to say, wow, this person either crushed this or they didn't do the workout correctly. So we assumed that these scores would ultimately be changed and that they would figure it out. And I think as time has gone on, I think people have just become more and more up in arms about it. And now, again, I think the question lies like, okay, well, if this happened now, what's the change going to be, and where do we draw the line in the future? And, as far as the programming is concerned, like, why can we assume that something like this won't happen again? Which is scary, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to have to worry about this stuff. You want to see a workout, you want to be able to focus, you want to be able to do it. You don't want to have to worry that ultimately, there's going to be something like this that happens that could keep some people out. And we all know how hard these athletes work. I mean, get it right. Something like this should not be an issue. You've got to get it right. Right. I mean, you say like, oh, well, it doesn't affect the best, the top of the top. I mean, we've seen scenarios where people have snuck in the past, in say, there's been 100 people, someone snuck in at 96, then they've gone to the games. Or, some in the Masters, we've seen a ton where, people have come from nowhere to do extremely well and make the games or finish high or affect who does make the games. So I don't want to hear those excuses. I feel like this is a scenario that, there needs to be a better explanation. And then we need to see somebody come out with a statement and answer questions and talk about it instead of hiding behind, what to me sounds like a pretty shady, a pretty shady argument coming from them, honestly.
I do think it's a little bit disappointing because while they did release this statement, we had to ask for the statement, and this would be a perfect opportunity for them to hold a press conference and let journalists, coaches, maybe even athletes ask questions and get concrete answers. We can see that they did make some adjustments from some of those scoring changes. Brian, I think that you tallied up about how many changes have they made since the leaderboard finalized?
Well, there's two things that have happened since the finalization of the leaderboard, and this is just coming to me. That statement, that was the first time I'd heard it, and I knew that it was coming about 30 minutes before we started this show. So it's a lot of scrambling to get things going here. But um, what I do know is that there are at least two scores for North American men on workout 3 that have been changed after the finalization of the leaderboard, and that is Brian Sanchez, who was in 3rd place, and his video was available public on YouTube. Andrew Hiller referenced it and showed that there was an inaccuracy with the number of shuttle runs he ran. And for some reason, CrossFit has decided to make that change after announcing the finalization of the leaderboard. Also, there was a guy, Alex Soroka, who was another guy who he was 20th in North America for this workout. His workout has also been adjusted. So there have been at least 2 changes that I know of that I've been able to track down just in the short amount of time that I knew this. I think what you're referencing is that on the scoring adjustments article, which had come out last Monday, there have been over 200 additions to that article in the last 6 to 12 hours. At least 100 for workout 3 alone, and then a plethora of others for both workouts 4 and 5. And obviously that is a ton of work to enter in the data for all the changes for all those athletes. But we know that those had happened. Many of those had actually happened prior to the original release of the scoring adjustments document. And as the CrossFit Games team, especially this year with the decision to move in a different direction in terms of who's the head programmer for the games, there's going to be a lot of questions asked. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny. And I think that they would be even double, triple, and quadruple checking to make sure that they're getting some of these things right the first time, knowing that there's going to be additional scrutiny placed on them for every decision and announcement and stage competition that happens. And it seems like right now they're caught with their pants down, so to speak. And instead of just saying, you know what, we messed this up and here's what we're going to do about it, they're trying to, from what everything I can tell, basically lie again. And they're going to get caught again, because there's already people around the world that have done the work that they're saying they don't want to do, and proven that in the case of North American men and European men, that there's at least 4 guys that have the clear and obvious potential to move into qualification at the cost of 4 other men that would move out of qualification if they did their due diligence in reviewing the workouts that Justin, mentioned look suspicious on the leaderboard, to the fact that you should red flag them, ask for those videos, take a look. You don't have to watch the whole thing. You'll know real quick if they did all the shuttle runs or not.
But why finalize the leaderboard if they're just going to go back and make all of these changes? That just doesn't make sense to me. Do you think it's because so many people in the community were bringing to light the inaccuracies, or like, where's the lack of communication there?
Look, I mean, it's been acknowledged that managing the CrossFit Games season in its current layout is very challenging. It's a huge undertaking, and the turnaround from the Open to the quarterfinals is small, and the quarterfinals are still going on. Individual quarterfinals have finished, but team quarterfinals are coming up. They had to release workout plans for that. They have to set up for the announcement of the workouts, and they've got who knows how many teams that they're going to have to do another round of scoring for this upcoming weekend. And 2 weeks after that is the Masters, the age groups, the occupational games. And then you got, about a month later, starts 4 weeks of semifinals. Then you have the last chance qualifier. I mean, it's a huge task. But this is what I think Justin was referring to. You know that task is big. So choose workouts that are easy to manage when the stages of competition are on a large scale, and save workouts with pistols and new movement standards for the live competitions when the fields are smaller like that. And especially in the year 1 of a new system with heavy scrutiny placed upon the games team, just make decisions that are going to set yourself up for success. And this, I don't think that happened here.
I was just going to piggyback off that. I think Brian raises a great point, which ultimately is we were talking about it. I mean, it is an enormous task, and I think there's a way, especially in the programming, to you'll get the people that you want to get through. Like you can program it, but you can make it a lot easier on the judges, and you can make it a lot easier on yourself when watching videos, to be able to get the athletes you want to be able to get through to semifinals, etc. And I think in this case, obviously, we've seen that there were probably some choices that were made that they're looking at now and being like, oh shit, that was a bad one, right? Like we shouldn't have done that. And now ultimately, I mean, they're paying the price a little bit with the scrutiny that they're under, and with the judging inconsistencies and with the scoring inconsistencies. It's it's something that I don't think is going to go away that easily, and it's certainly not going to go away when you make a statement like you just did, where ultimately I think that's going to be proven to be incorrect. So I'm not sure exactly why they took that stance, but I guess hopefully we'll find out in the coming days or weeks, and maybe we'll actually get to talk to someone and ask some questions and get some answers. I don't know. They've preached transparency, especially with the new regime, and I have been on a few of those calls with the PFAA, and I felt like there was definitely some things moving in the right direction. But this is obviously a kind of a black eye on things at the moment, and it's not a good look. I think everyone is frustrated, but beyond that, it just really doesn't look good for the sport. Especially for people looking in, it's kind of like, man, this is a shit show. They call themselves a sport, and like, this is what's going on. It's a challenge. And, unfortunately, like it just doesn't look good. It really doesn't.
When it comes to taking a stance, CrossFit did take a stance for one specific situation that we have been talking about, Anikha Greer. She did the workout. We can see that she did the workout in other athletes' videos on time, but had some technical difficulties when submitting workout number 5. I'm okay if CrossFit wants to take a stance and be firm with it. I guess my question for you, Justin, is, as a coach, somebody who watched her do the workout, see how that unfolded, what are your thoughts now when CrossFit is now muddling the waters, so to speak, with other rules when people submitted scores that were wrong and they're still showing up on the leaderboard?
Yeah, it's tough. I was there, obviously. I watched Anikha do the workout. I saw her do it on Saturday. We multiple times throughout the day after the workout was over, myself and her coach and other coaches to all the athletes were constantly talking about submitting your score, checking your score, submitting your score, checking your score. And I don't think there's any doubt that, after listening to things, Anikha has, she has taken some of the blame for that. There's no doubt, that she should have double checked, etc. I think what's challenging is that when they take such a hard line on someone like her, who is obviously, listen, guys, I've been doing this a very long time. Okay, I coached my first CrossFit Games athlete back in 2010 at the CrossFit Games, who came in fourth. I have seen CrossFit Games athletes. I know what they look like. And Anikha Greer is someone who would have had an extremely good chance to make the CrossFit Games this year. There's no doubt about that. At the worst, she's in a last chance qualifier and she affects who goes to the games. She is a phenomenal athlete, and there's no doubt in my mind at this moment in time, she's top, 40 to 50 in the world. There's no doubt about it. So, I always want to see the best athletes move on to semis, et cetera. So personally, I would love to see her there. That being said, she, obviously she did take some blame there. She is, to fault in a lot of ways for what happened. But when you see what's going on with CrossFit, when you see workouts that are released early, when you see the inconsistencies with the scoring, when you see them kind of, say something, and then when it doesn't come true, most likely you're going to probably see them take a left turn and say something else. It's a little bit hypocritical, and it's hard, I think, to not look at some of these cases with the athletes case by case. When really and truly you've had now so many cases that have been, that have not gone as planned. And you've not delivered on what you were supposed to deliver on, or what you said you were going to deliver on. So it's hard. I think it's very easy to take a look and say that, it's hypocritical. And unfortunately, I the way that I also looked at it was, I'm not sure that you would have gotten a fight from any of the athletes on Anikha. I think if 12 minutes or 15 minutes after the deadline, she emailed them if they had made the switch, and I don't think there would have been any athletes that were like, holy shit, like she shouldn't be in. Like, I have a feeling that the athletes would have been like, the girl would have finished 15th. She got 350 on that workout. She's done the work. It's obvious. Just watch it. Like, she's phenomenal. I doubt seriously you would have had anybody at any of the semifinals who didn't feel like she belonged there because she was 12 minutes late. So it's hard. It's hard to say it. But at the end of the day, I just think if you're going to preach, such a hard line, then you got to get your shit right. You know what I mean? Like, you can't preach it and then not do it. You know what I mean?
Brian, as somebody who's been in this CrossFit space for a while now, what does an error like this, what kind of implications do they have on the sport moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, one of the the big things is that they want to have huge participation in this competition, starting with the Open and moving to the quarterfinals, etc. And I'm kind of thinking back to 2018 when they got rid of regionals, and there were a huge group of athletes who knew that they probably wouldn't ever have a chance to make the CrossFit Games, but it was a great goal for them to have a chance to make regionals, and that was taken away from them. And there were a lot of people that in 2019 and 2020 didn't sign up for the Open because of that. That thing that they'd been chasing was taken from them, and they had a hard time wrapping their head around it. And what I fear might happen this time is that because the semifinals has now replaced regionals in the current system, and that's the new goal for that caliber of athlete. There's 500 men in North America that probably know they don't have a chance to make the games, but definitely think they have a chance to make semifinals. I think that group of athletes signed up in bigger numbers this year than last year, and that's the group of athletes that's going to look at this and have the same response they did in 2018 and say, forget it, man. You guys can't administer this competition fairly. It doesn't matter how hard I train. I don't know that my performance is going to be assessed. in an adequate manner against my peers, and I don't know where I'm going to fall on this leaderboard. I can't tell how well I actually did this year, and you're not getting my 20 or $50 next year.
And I think that's incredibly unfortunate because, there are a lot of athletes that, finish in the top 500 who will improve immensely and be good enough, to get close to semifinals or make semifinals. And, it's just leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and it's an issue now that I feel like, I think CrossFit has to take it head on. I think they have to accept responsibility, and I think they have to try to make amends. And a lot of that comes with communication, and if you're not going to communicate and you're not going to be available and give us access to ask questions, to ask how the frig did this happen, right? Like, what's going on? And then, they can kind of talk a little bit about it. I don't know, man. It's a bad look, and I hope that we're going to get a lot more communication in the days to come because, you're not going to put like that statement. You're not going to put it past us. Like, like Brian's too fucking smart. There are too many people around here, Hiller and these guys. Like I'm coaching my guys now for semifinals, right? I'm not kind of worrying about it as much in the sense of doing the math and doing the deep dive in the leaderboard. But you're going to get people that are really smart that are going to do the dive in the leaderboard and are going to figure it out. And they're going to be able to tell you to the number how many people like missed out and how there would have been, these athletes would have been in, these athletes would have been out. There's definitely people that are going to do that. I know some have already started to do that. So, and they're not going to be able to escape that. So, putting out, kind of this nebulous statement that, almost sounded just like a bunch of words to confuse people. It's not, it's ultimately, that's not going to be the answer. Like I really don't think that that's going to be the end of it. And I think there's going to be a lot more questions and they're going to have to be willing to answer some of those questions.
What do you both want to see from CrossFit now that, I mean, they might be thinking we put out the statement, it's out there, we're just going to move past on to the next. As Brian was saying, we have team quarterfinals coming up. Then we have the age groups, and then we go to semifinals. Do you think that this is the end of talking about workout number 3 and the errors?
Well, it's not just workout number 3. It's just the capacity to administer a fair competition. That's all anyone's asking for. And if so I don't see how this can possibly be the end. Like, this is going to have to be talked about at some point. And some people have already put forth some ideas of ways that they could potentially increase their resources to have the means, the manpower, and the time to handle situations like this should they arise again. Obviously, this is a situation we never want to see. But it could be as simple as just asking yourself, was that the best way to list the shuttle run distance? Because if the same workout existed with handstand walks, it wouldn't say 8 handstand walks. It would say 200 feet of handstand walks. And 200 feet is a lot. You're not going to screw up 200 feet. No one's ever done half the number of handstand walks or half the distance of handstand walking. So even just simple conversations like that, of being really clear and really sure that what we're communicating is something that we are confident that at the quarterfinal stage, where as many as 30,000 people can possibly participate, is something that excellent percentage of those aren't going to screw up, because we don't want to deal with this again. And that can be like, the very baseline, but at the more macro level, they need to address that community and they need to say, we feel bad about this. We know this is not how this should run. This is not going to happen again. And here's our plan. And it doesn't have to be right now. They can say, hey, we're in the middle of the season. We acknowledge that this wasn't a great situation. We don't want to see this happen again. We've got to get through the rest of the season, but rest assured, come the off season, we're going to have, meetings amongst ourselves. And we're going to come up with a different plan to have a quarterfinals that will be absent of these flaws.
Yeah, I think about the number of athletes that do quarterfinals, and I think about the incredibly challenging task of making sure that is run fairly and correctly. And I think obviously we saw this year that wasn't executed. And I think they need to take ownership. And I think they need to be honest about it. And I think we need to be able to ask questions. They need to be very transparent about their plan for the future. Because, you know, they're a little bit lucky right now that they've got the team quarters coming and they've got other things coming. It's like, you know, I have a 2-year-old, right? And my 2-year-old is watching Thomas the Train, or we, you know, and like you want to get him to do something else, right? Or he's like freaking out about one specific thing. And then you're like, oh, look, here's something else over here. The problem is that my 2-year-old's attention span, he goes that way. Like, we're not two, right? Like, we're going to continue to ask questions. We're going to continue. So there's going to be some other things going on, but at the end of the day, this is still a big story and we still want answers. And ultimately, you know, in my opinion, you know, they haven't really come to a conclusion. You know, just because you put out a statement doesn't mean there's a conclusion, because right now it's incomplete. And it's still, you know, it's still not fair. So I think there's going to have to be some transparency and more communication there. And ultimately, you know, the community is going to want to see and understand what the plan will be in the future, that something like this never happens again.
Brian, what is your bottom line?
My bottom line here is, you know, I'm disappointed in the way that this has been handled, but I'm still hopeful that CrossFit will step up to the plate and rectify it.
Well, bottom line is, put your money where your mouth is, man. Like, you've talked about transparency. You've talked about, you know, being more open with the athletes and having a better relationship and all these other things moving forward. You know, this was a step back. So you got to put your money where your mouth is, and let's get this thing going where we want it to go, right? Like, we will all want to move this sport together. You know, I think it's beneficial for everyone. This was not a good moment, and it still is not a good moment. And they need to take ownership of it, and we need to figure out some solutions.
Justin Cotler, Brian Friend, thank you guys so much. We had a lot to unpack today. Hopefully this isn't the end of the conversation, and we do have follow-up stories. We'll continue to reach out to CrossFit, and hopefully they'll be more transparent in the future, and we can just keep making the sport better, guys.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Lauren.